All right, so you're here, right? You want to level up in life, build something that lasts. But ideally, you want to see results. Like yesterday.
Makes sense. Everyone wants to hit the fast forward button on success, right?
Totally. And you guys sent us this YouTube transcript. This one from Mark Tilbury.
Yeah, the one about making your first 10 grand as a student.
Exactly. So today we are diving deep into Tilbury's advice, dissecting the actionable stuff and that crucial mindset shift. He makes a big deal about that. Like, it's not just about the money, it's that foundation you build.
Yeah, he really emphasizes the mental game, doesn't he?
Big time. Now, Tilbury, he's very structured in his approach. He lays out 3 phases for hitting that initial $10,000 goal. Then he's got this whole skill pyramid thing, 4 parts to it. That's all about scaling online services, which he's a huge proponent of.
Yeah, he really seems to believe that's the ticket these days, right? Online services.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it doesn't stop there. He also walks through turning that initial income into like serious long-term wealth.
Yeah.
Different investment strategies ranging from low to high risk. So we've got a lot to unpack today.
Definitely a lot to cover.
But let's start with that first big milestone,
Yeah.
making that first 10 grand. How does he frame that?
He frames it in a really interesting way. It's not just about go out there and make 10 grand. It's more about that first $10,000 being a learning experience, like a skill building exercise. It's about proving to yourself that you can create income. You're not just waiting for it to happen.
So it's more about the process than the actual amount.
Exactly. He wants you to learn that generating income is a skill you can develop, not some random thing that happens to some people and not to others.
That's a really empowering way to look at it.
Totally changes the game, right?
And it explains why he's pretty cautious about those like get-rich-quick schemes, like
Yeah.
jumping headfirst into crypto or day trading when you're just starting out. Why does he kind of pump the brakes on those for beginners?
He pumps the brakes because, and he's right about this, those areas often require a decent chunk of upfront capital. And, a fair amount of luck, especially if you're new. He's not saying those are bad, but more like they're potential ways to grow your wealth after you've built that solid foundation, not your starting point.
Okay, so if those quick hit options are off the table for now, what does he actually recommend for bringing in that initial income? He gives a few starting points, right?
He does. He outlines 4 main ways to get going. So the first one he talks about is offering in-person services.
Okay, in-person services. So like, what are we talking about here?
This is the more straightforward stuff, right? Personal training, delivering things, walking dogs, even some of the skilled trades like nail art, barbling. Or maybe you're into video and you offer videography services, stuff like that.
Right, makes sense. So what's the main appeal there?
The big thing here is quick cash flow, right? You provide the service, you get paid, pretty simple. And usually the barrier to entry is pretty low. You don't need a ton of fancy equipment or special certifications to get started. He even uses the example of his own early hustle, washing cars in wealthier neighborhoods.
Oh yeah, I remember that story. What was his thinking there? Why specifically those neighborhoods?
Well, he figured that in those areas, people probably valued a clean car, but maybe didn't have the time or just didn't want to do it themselves. And he noticed something interesting. Tidy gardens often meant dirty cars. So it shows that even with a basic service, if you think about who your ideal customer is, you can really increase your chances of success.
Yeah, that's pretty clever. So basic service, but smart targeting.
Yeah.
But he also talks about some of the downsides of in-person services, right? Like limitations.
Exactly. There are definitely some inherent limitations. The biggest ones are geography and the fact that you're directly trading your time for money. You can only be in one place at a time.
So scalability is an issue, right? Even if you're killing it, there's a ceiling on how much you can personally do.
Exactly. He's big on thinking about scalability from the beginning. In-person services can be a great way to get that initial cash flowing, but they might not be the best long-term strategy. That brings us to a second option, selling local products.
Okay, so local products, what does he have in mind there?
Think home-baked goods, handmade crafts, artwork, maybe even produce if you've got a garden. Things people in your local community might want to buy.
So what's the main difference Tilbury highlights between selling these local products and those in-person services we were just talking about?
Well, the big difference is the timeline, right? Like, when do you actually see a profit? With services, you usually get paid pretty quickly after you finish the job, but with products, there are often upfront costs for materials, and it can take longer to find those buyers and build a consistent sales flow. He talks about his own experience trying to make some extra cash by building and selling model airplanes.
Right, and what did he learn from that?
He enjoyed the hands-on aspect, the actual building process. He liked that. But he realized he was putting in a lot of time and effort for a relatively small return. The cost of materials cut into his profits, and even though he was targeting a specific niche model airplane enthusiasts, his potential customer base was still pretty limited. So it can be a good way to make some extra money, maybe turn a hobby into a side hustle, but it might not be the fastest way to hit that $10,000 goal.
Okay, so let's move on to his third option. He calls this global products.
Right. So this is where things start to get interesting. Global products, you're thinking bigger. Think about launching a clothing brand online, drop shipping, reselling sneakers, using print on demand services, things like that. What's the big shift here?
I'd say the main thing is you're no longer limited by geography, right? Suddenly your potential customer base isn't just your town, it's the entire world. Anyone with an internet connection. Kilbury even mentions looking into manufacturing in China for his model plane designs, trying to tap into that global market.
Which really highlights both the potential and the initial challenges. He talks about how he had to constantly reinvest any profits back into buying more inventory. It was a cycle of restocking, not immediately pocketing the cash. It required a lot of patience, he says. Could take a few months, maybe even a year, to really see things take off. But the potential for more passive income is there.
So higher potential, but also requires more patience and upfront investment.
Got it. So that brings us to option number 4, which is actually the one he champions as the fastest route these days, selling online services. What makes this so appealing in today's world?
He sees this as the sweet spot. It combines the wide reach of selling products online with the high profit margins you typically see with services. He mentions profit margins around 70 to 80%, which is pretty amazing. Plus, the barrier to entry can be pretty low, and you can start seeing income almost immediately. That's a big draw.
That makes sense.
Yep.
So skills like copywriting, video editing, designing those thumbnails, running online ads for businesses, managing social media accounts, that kind of stuff, right? Yeah, those are all great examples. There's a huge demand for those skills online. So with all these options, how does Tilbury suggest people figure out which online service to actually focus on?
Yeah, good question. How do you narrow it down?
He has this really practical framework, 3 questions for you to ask yourself. First, what are you actually good at? Like genuinely good at. Second, what do you actually enjoy learning more about? And third, what are the problems that businesses consistently struggle with? He says the ideal scenario is finding that overlap where your skills and interests meet a real market need.
Makes total sense. You want to do something you're good at and enjoy, but it also needs to be something people will pay for. Now, he also addresses a really common hurdle that a lot of people face when they're just starting out, the temptation to wait until you've perfectly mastered a skill before you actually start offering it. What's his take on that?
He's pretty blunt about that. He calls it totally backwards. He says you need to start gaining real-world experience ASAP. His advice is to initially price your services below the market rate because at this stage, the goal isn't to make max profit, it's to earn and learn. You're getting paid while you're refining your skills.
Okay, so you've taken the plunge, you're offering an online service, you're starting to see some income. How do you take that initial success and scale it up? How do you move towards that $10,000 per month goal?
Yeah, good question. That's where his skill pyramid comes in. It's all about transforming a valuable skill into a sustainable business.
So tell me more about this pyramid. How does it work?
He breaks it down into 4 key elements. The first one is positioning. This is all about how you present yourself and your services to potential clients.
So this isn't about learning a whole bunch of new skills. It's more about how you leverage the ones you already have.
Exactly. He stresses the importance of offering services that directly help businesses make more money. Because businesses, they think about spending differently if they see it as an investment, if it leads to higher revenue or solves a big problem for them. He uses the example of a video editor. Instead of just being a video editor for anyone on YouTube, you specialize in editing sales videos for online entrepreneurs. Or instead of designing any old thumbnail, you become the go-to thumbnail expert for creators who are focused on maximizing click-through rates. You get the idea.
Yeah, totally. It's about targeting those clients who understand the value you bring. And the second element of the pyramid is leverage, right?
Yes, leverage. This is all about shifting from getting paid by the hour to getting paid based on the results you achieve for your clients.
Okay, I think I see where this is going. So instead of trading time for a set fee, you're charging based on the value and outcomes you deliver.
Precisely. He uses the example of running Facebook ads. If you charge hourly, your income is limited. And the client might be hesitant to give you more hours. But if you charge based on the return on investment, the ROI, the conversation changes completely. For every dollar they spend, how many dollars in sales do they get back? That's the question. When clients see a clear link between your work and their increased profits, they're way more willing to invest in your services. Same principle applies to social media management. You're not just scheduling posts, you're driving engagement, generating leads, boosting sales.
That's a huge shift in mindset, both for you and the client. All right, the third element is reach. This is all about making sure clients can actually find you, right?
Absolutely. The goal is to get to the point where clients are coming to you instead of you constantly having to hustle to find them. He tells this great story about this graphic designer he found on TikTok who was just posting these amazing, like, movie poster designs just for fun, not even trying to get clients. But his work went viral and his DMs were flooded with people wanting to hire him.
So it's the power of putting your work out there, even if you're just doing it for yourself initially.
Exactly. He says you need to be actively showcasing your results. Share before and after examples of your work. Explain how your thumbnails led to higher click-through rates. Document the growth you've achieved for social media accounts you manage, that kind of thing.
So basically, build a portfolio, make yourself visible online, let the work speak for itself. And the final piece of the puzzle, the fourth element in his skill pyramid, is automation.
Right, automation. This is about becoming a well-oiled machine. It's more than just being talented. It's about being reliable and consistently delivering.
So you're saying it's not enough to just be good at what you do?
It's definitely a big part of it, but he makes the point that a lot of people, especially when they're starting out, they really struggle with staying organized, meeting deadlines, all that. The people who command the highest fees, they're not always the most talented, but they are incredibly organized, they communicate clearly, they're proactive, and they make the whole process smooth and easy for their clients.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So how does implementing automation actually contribute to that?
Think of it as your central nervous system, making sure nothing slips through the cracks. He specifically recommends using a CRM system, like Odoo CRM, for example. This helps you manage all your client interactions, track potential projects, organize your schedule, keep all your files in one central location. Basically, it helps you stay on top of everything so you can be super reliable and deliver consistently.
So you're not relying on your memory or scrambling to find that email thread from 3 months ago.
Exactly. He highlights features like being able to visually track your opportunities on a Kanban board and setting automatic reminders for important tasks, all those little things that make a big difference.
Okay, so you've honed your skills, you've positioned yourself strategically, you're leveraging your value, people are finding you online, you've got automation in place to keep things running smoothly, you're making good money. Now, how do you avoid just spending it all? How do you actually start building long-term wealth?
Yeah, that's the next level, right. He talks about this in terms of his risk scale for building wealth.
Okay, the risk scale, what's that all about?
He starts by making a clear distinction between being rich and being wealthy. Rich, to him, is just about spending the money you earn. Wealthy is about using your income to make more income over time. And then he lays out 4 key investment areas, starting with the safest and gradually increasing the risk level.
All right, let's go through those. So the first one, the safest option is what? A high-yield savings account.
Yep, that's the one. Although he's a little cheeky about the whole high yield part, he even mentions something like a 3% interest rate.
Not exactly going to make you a millionaire overnight. So what's the point of a high-yield savings account in his strategy?
It's less about making big returns and more about having that safety net, a financial cushion to cover unexpected expenses. He sees it as a way to avoid having to sell off other investments at a bad time, like during a market downturn. He likes the fact that you can access the money easily, no strict rules or penalties for withdrawals.
So it's about having that financial peace of mind. Got it.
Got it.
What's next on the scale?
Next up are index funds. This is where he starts to get really excited. He's a big fan of index funds.
So remind me, how do those work again?
They're a way to invest in a whole bunch of companies at once, which helps diversify your risk and lets you ride the wave of the overall market growth. Platforms like mentioned Com investment platform name make it super easy to invest in them these days.
So you're not betting on any single company. You're spreading your money across a whole bunch of them.
Exactly. He describes them as pretty low maintenance. You don't have to constantly monitor them. And he says they have the potential for really solid long-term growth because of that diversification. He specifically mentions the S&P 500 as a prime example. It tracks the performance of a bunch of the top U.S. companies. He also talks about some other index funds like total stock market index funds for both the U.S. and the U.K. and emerging market index funds to really broaden your reach.
And didn't he give that really compelling example about how consistently investing a small amount daily from a young age can potentially turn you into a millionaire thanks to the historical growth of these funds.
He does, and it really drives home the point about the power of consistency and long-term thinking. He says the average return of the S&P 500 over the last 10 years has been over 10%. That's pretty incredible when you think about it.
So small, consistent investments over a long period can really add up.
Well,
All right, let's move up the risk ladder. What's next? Individual stocks.
yep. Individual stocks, this is where you start getting a bit more hands-on.
So what's the appeal of investing in individual companies? Why do people do that?
Well, there's definitely more risk compared to those diversified index funds we talked about, but there's also the potential for much bigger returns if you choose wisely, of course. Tilbury talks about how he actually found it really engaging to learn how to analyze financial statements, understand how companies perform, and make those individual picks. He also mentions that the gains can feel more tangible when it's an individual company you've chosen, rather than a tiny piece of a giant index fund.
Right, so it's more active, more involved. You're not just passively riding the market.
Exactly. But of course, that higher potential reward also comes with higher risk. There's a chance you'll lose money, especially if you don't know what you're doing. And finally, at the top of his risk scale, we have cryptocurrency.
Ah, crypto. Everyone's talking about it. What's Tilbury's take?
It's interesting. He admits that he was pretty skeptical at first, didn't really believe in it. But now he does actually have some investments in Bitcoin and Ethereum.
So he came around.
Yeah, he did. He sees the potential for big returns, especially with some of those smaller, more volatile coins. But he's very clear about the risks. His approach is much more cautious now. Slow and steady accumulation, not trying to time the market or chase those crazy pumps. And he really stresses that you should only invest what you can afford to lose after doing your own research. Don't just follow the hype.
Wise words. So to sum up Tilbury's overall strategy, it seems like it's about hitting these three major milestones, right? First, focus on generating that initial 10 grand, ideally by leveraging an online service to build valuable skills. Then, take that income and scale it up significantly by mastering his four-part skill pyramid, focusing on positioning, leverage, reach, and automation. And finally, once you've got a solid income stream coming in, start building long-term wealth through a diversified investment approach that aligns with your risk tolerance. Did I get that right?
You got it. He's all about taking action, building momentum, and then using that momentum to create lasting financial security. He emphasizes that making that first $10,000 is a huge mental hurdle. It's not just about the money, it's about proving to yourself that you can do it, and that changes everything.
It's about shifting from being a consumer to becoming a creator, taking control of your financial future. So taking everything we've discussed today, here's a question for you to think about. Now that you've explored all these different avenues for generating income and building wealth, what's the single most concrete step you can commit to taking today to start building your own financial foundation? What's that first domino you can knock over? Or maybe, thinking about Tilbury's risk scale for investments, where do you see yourself starting your investment journey and why? We've given you the tools, now it's time to put them to work.
It's all about taking action, right?
Exactly.